want some of this. Attaboy!
Hello everyone, welcome back to another Genshin Impact video. So Itto just dropped and many players are wondering whether or not he's actually worth pulling for. Is he worth the hype? Can he deal out the numbers? And most importantly, is he worth your valuable primos? Today we'll be taking an in-depth look at C0 Itto while using a level 80 Refinement 1 Whiteblind. Although I did manage to get my hands on his signature weapon, the Red Hornstone Thresher, I decided to focus on the Whiteblind for this video so that free-to-play and casual players can know just how hard he can hit without his signature weapon. This will be my honest opinion and review about Itto at C0, and I'll try to be as transparent with you guys as possible so that you can make a decision for yourself. If you do end up finding this video helpful at all, please feel free to leave me a like and comment down below with your thoughts on Itto so far. Do you think that Itto is a good unit or worth pulling for, or do you think that you should go ahead and skip him? And if you want to see more Genshin Impact content from me, make sure to hit that subscribe button and click that notification bell. We're on our way to 20,000 subscribers and I'd love to have you along for the ride. Alright, but with all that out of the way, let's get into the video. So before we actually get into the damage showcase, let's go over Itto's numbers. My current Itto build has him sitting at 1083 attack, 2989 defense, 72.4% crit rate, 135.5% crit damage, 122% energy recharge, which is a little bit low but workable, and his geo bonus is currently sitting at 70.6%. As I mentioned, he's currently equipped with the Whiteblind at Refinement rank 1. It's currently at level 80 out of 80, meaning that it can be ascended one more time and leveled up 10 more times, and since it's still only at R1, this means that it can be refined 4 more times in order to maximize its passive. The Whiteblind's passive actually synergizes very well with Itto since it does boost your defense and attack. It is a bit frustrating that you do have to build these stacks before entering his burst to maximize on your damage, but since you have to build superlative super strength stacks anyway, it's not that big of an issue. As for his artifacts, there's really only one set that you want to be running on Itto anyway, and that's the Husk of Opulent Dream set. You want to make sure that you're going for the 4-piece set if you can manage it because it'll give you additional stacks of defense and geo damage. Altogether, when you add up all the effects from the 2-piece set and 4-piece set, you can end up with an additional 54% defense and 24% geo bonus damage. Making sure that you snapshot these stacks is going to be imperative to dealing as much damage as possible during his burst. As for constellations, like I said, he is C0, and as for his talents, they're currently sitting at 878, meaning there's still room for improvement. Also, to make sure that I kept the focus on Itto, I made sure that all of his teammates had level 4-star weapons, and I've chosen artifact sets that should help them support Itto to the highest degree. Alright, and with all the stats out of the way, let's get into the actual damage showcase. So first off, I want to show Itto's damage all by himself without relying on his teammates. By making sure to build up his stacks both on the Opulent Dream set and on the Whiteblind, you can see that he actually doesn't do too bad on his own. In fact, when he does enter his burst mode, he reaches all the way up to 4,212 attack. Definitely not bad for not relying on Gorou, Zhongli, or Bennett in this instance. Okay, but let's go ahead and see what happens when we start adding his teammates into the mix. By adding in Zhongli's shield, we do activate Geo Resonance, which gives us increased damage while shielded, as well as Geo Res Shred. We also get an additional 20% Geo Res Shred from Zhongli's shield itself, and we also get an additional 20% attack from Tenacity of the Millilith. On top of this, by adding Gorou into the rotation, we do get an additional defense boost, interruption resistance, and extra Geo bonus damage. And as you can see, this is a huge increase to all of our damage. Okay, but let's try one more time with all the previous buffs, but let's add in Bennett. As you can see, when we do finally snapshot everything, Itto's attack skyrockets all the way up to 5,866 attack, letting our charge attacks do up to 28,000 damage each, and letting the finishing move do over 55,000 damage. I want you to keep in mind that this is all free-to-play achievable damage, and that, like I said, the Whiteblind isn't fully maxed out yet, and neither are Itto's talents. Oh, and one more thing before we move on to the next segment. Do not be like me and underestimate USHI. USHI is a freight train and he's not scared to run you over. He's not afraid to do 60k plus damage at talent level 6. My man's has no problem stomping you out of existence. The enemies in Genshin Impact are lucky that USHI doesn't also scale off of your defense, cause otherwise he would be nuking things like Zhongli's burst. Okay, but now that we've seen what Itto is capable of in a controlled setting, let's go ahead and take a look at his performance when things aren't so stationary. Our first two victims are going to be the Maku Kenki and and then Child. I picked these two fights in general because I knew that the enemy would be bouncing around a little bit and the fights would be longer. This way I could see how Itto performed when his burst was down. What I ended up learning was, Itto's damage during his burst is not an issue. Even with under 150% crit damage, he's still performing really well. Many players were worried that he would underperform because he doesn't have access to other elements. As we all know, Geo is defensive by nature, but Itto's damage multipliers are so impressive that it really doesn't matter. While in his burst, he's able to easily whittle away his enemy's health bars. The only true issue that really does arise is when he's not in his burst. Because Itto is not built for physical damage, he hits like how his arms look. But in all seriousness, it really isn't good. This means that he's completely reliant on his teammates in order to battery him so that he can be in his burst form as much as possible. But this is actually pretty difficult considering that he has such a high burst cost, and his best partner Gorou also has an extremely high burst cost. Meaning that even though I did have Gorou with 200 energy recharge, since my Itto's was only at 122, I did struggle with making sure that all of my bursts were up consistently. There are a few fixes to this, such as adding another Geo member like Ningguang, Geo Traveler, or Albedo, but sometimes it can be difficult to mix and match your team because you do need a shielder and a healer, or at least it's preferable, meaning that it's actually pretty hard to be flexible while building teams with Itto. Essentially, you're locked into having at least 3 Geo members, or if you do decide to go with only 2 Geo members, then you at least need to make sure that they're able to battery your team to some degree. And then making sure that at least one unit on your team is also a healer makes things a little bit more difficult. One thing to note is that even though Bennett did increase Itto's damage by a lot, I actually found more success just by having Albedo in my team instead. While I did lose the insane attack buff, I also gained consistent off-field damage and more importantly, even more Geo energy. So if you can manage to squeeze in Albedo, then I definitely recommend it since they do have such good synergy. Oh, let's talk about something that I actually found very important. So I was fighting La Signora and a few things went wrong. The first part of the fight went about as expected, it really wasn't that big of an issue. However, the second part of the fight was where I started to see a few of Itto's issues arise. Itto is very good at pummeling enemies that are in one place. So the issue wasn't that I wasn't dealing enough damage, but rather every time La Signora moved, I found myself having to chase down after her and therefore losing valuable time during my burst. And since Itto's burst accounts for the grand majority of all of his damage, this was a huge issue. And on top of this, because his elemental and physical resistance is reduced during his burst, I also realized that he was actually taking far more damage than the rest of his teammates. Because I wasn't really paying attention and thought that La Signora wouldn't be that big of an issue, I actually ended up losing my Itto the first time I attempted this. This was a huge wake-up call and kind of an ego bruiser. I have not had a character die on me when I'm protected by Zhongli's shield in months. So it's obvious that this caught me a little off guard, but at the end of the day, I'm kind of glad it happened because it did point out a few issues with Itto if you're not playing carefully. The 3 big issues were increased damage taken, not properly and consciously battering my team, and not paying attention to where La Signora was moving. I readjusted my strats and then tried another time and everything went well. I properly batteried my team, meaning that I did have my burst up when I needed it, and I made sure not to use my burst when I knew that La Signora was about to move. Itto's damage was more than enough to take La Signora out, I just had to make sure that I was in the right position at the right time. Oh, and speaking of situations where you take damage even through your shield, let's talk about Spiral Abyss. I decided to take the side with the Electro Doggos so that we could see how Itto would perform when the odds aren't stacked in his favor. So how does Itto fare when dealing with multiple hordes of enemies? Honestly, surprisingly well. Because his burst does extend his AoE, he actually does hit multiple enemies pretty well. His normal charged attacks and final finishing move all hit in an AoE range, making it surprisingly easy to beat down enemies around you. Again, the only real issue was whenever I didn't have his burst up. Outside of his burst, Itto just does not have enough damage to take down enemies, especially in Spiral Abyss where enemies often have close to or over 1 million HP. So more so than ever, even more so than the world bosses, you really need to make sure that you're properly batterying your team or give Itto and his teammates a lot of energy recharge. But as long as you can get his burst up consistency, then you shouldn't really run into too many problems. The only thing that I'm really worried about is when the Abyss Heralds come back, because to take down their final shield, you do want to be proccing as many elemental reactions as possible, and because Geo has such a hard time taking down elemental shields, I can see Itto main struggling in the future. This doesn't make him a bad unit, but it is something to keep in mind. Okay, but would I consider Itto a good character, and should you pull for him? Knowing everything that I know now, and after testing him extensively since he launched, I can easily say that Itto is an extremely strong unit, and definitely worth pulling for if you like Geo characters. But again, let me emphasize that last point point if you like Geo characters. Itto is absolutely fantastic in mono Geo comps, but I personally wouldn't find myself enjoying him if I decided to play him any other way. As it stands, playing him outside of Geo just doesn't feel comfortable, and without proper synergies and energy batteries, he feels extremely clunky. You could possibly get around this if you are using teammates such as the Raiden Shogun who can supplement his energy costs, but he really feels most at home when he does have at least 2 other Geo party members, meaning that characters like Gorou, Albedo, Ningguang, Geo Traveler, and Zhongli are all going to be Itto's best friends. And if you don't at least have a few of these units, then I definitely recommend picking them up the next time that they're available. As to how Itto does compare to other main DPS units, I do think that he does compete fairly well. Although he can't cause big reaction damage since he is a Geo unit, his damage multipliers more than make up for it, and he deals enough damage to definitely be considered a top tier DPS. I think that he actually competes fairly well with units like Eula and Xiao, and actually gives them a run for their money in terms of total damage output. However, just like these units, he's also completely reliant on his burst, so you have to compensate accordingly. However, despite him actually turning out to be an amazing DPS unit, I still wouldn't recommend him for newer players. This is because if you don't have the proper characters to support him, such as Geo characters, then you might end up struggling. This paired with the fact that all of his Ascension materials are all locked behind Inazuma, meaning that you won't be able to level him up until you meet current endgame content. Therefore, going for rerun characters like Xiao and Ganyu, who might be right around the corner, might be a better choice for newer players. However, if you are a veteran and can properly support him, then I would highly recommend you go for him if you want a Geo main DPS. Itto has become the golden standard for DPS Geo characters, and while characters like Noelle and Ningguang are not too far behind, if you want the highest damage output possible and the character that's going to be best in the most situations, then Itto's your man. Or should I say he's your Oni. Your one and only Arataki Itto. If you ended up enjoying the video, please feel free to leave me a like and comment down below. I'd greatly appreciate it, since it does help me boost into the YouTube algorithm. And if you want to see more Genshin Impact content from me, make sure to hit that subscribe button and click that notification bell. But for now, that's all that I have to say about Itto, well, at least until my next video. So, until next time, best wishes. Bye.